Hello there, guys. What is going on? Daniel Charles back here again. Rational perspective, or as close as I can be today, on Spurs 2, Chelsea nil. Another defeat, another bleak day in this bleak season. As the title says, this just cannot continue from a Chelsea perspective. And I don't know what that means. I think for most people that probably does mean a change in head coach, but I'd be lying to you. And I think, if you listen to my review of the Southampton game last week, I was very, very negative after that game, as you'd probably expect after losing to the team placed bottom of the league. But it's just not, there's such little joy. It beats you down every week watching Chelsea at the moment. It really does. And from a coaching perspective, we can throw in the context of many things, whether that's a really large squad, a ridiculous squad of 33 players, of no preseason for Graham Potter, of injuries to key players throughout the time he's been in charge. And I don't think all those things can just be dismissed as excuses. I think some of those, that those are variables within there where you do think, well, if there was someone else in charge, are they going to have that much of a transformative effect? But from a very simple thing, it's like we assess things now over a block of games since the World Cup. And if you look at the block of games we've had since the World Cup and his first block of games, where sure, it did end badly before the World Cup, but there were at least positives you could cling on to, like tangible results, things you felt like since he came in that, tactical things or player performances. We have seen none of that really since the World Cup break. Nothing tangible in terms of results. Chelsea just don't look like they know how to score anymore. We, as a team, look so devoid of unity and spirit. And it's the same thing I said last week, and I'm sick and tired of sounding like a broken record, but I said it last week, adversity. Chelsea fail with adversity in games. And I thought we'd gotten away with one at half-time when Ziyech didn't get sent off, because I thought, well, that was going to be the game then. But then to come out and literally concede a goal at the start of the second half it's unacceptable. It really is. And the fact that there was such little response, that once again we struggled to create any good opportunities, which has actually been something we've done in recent weeks. Today we couldn't even do that, and then the game ends 2-0, and it's really depressing now. It just is. So we'll go through the team news, the team selection. We'll look at some of the player performances and all of that stuff. But I do come to the conclusion that it's not my style, and I'm never going to do this because I just hate the culture online of going after a head coach. And we will talk about something that is relevant to today's game, but I didn't have a chance. I was quite busy on Friday and Saturday, so I didn't have a chance to get out my preview and speak about the death threats towards Graham Potter. But I think on today's show, I'm going to address it because I do have to say something about it. I think it'd be irresponsible of me to not talk about it. But if you are new around here, hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the therapy. Even though I don't want to steal Jan's football therapy thing, that's what it has to be at the moment watching Chelsea, because it is just so bleak. It really is, and so unenjoyable. It really is. So if you want to share it with someone, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in. Son of Chelsea is a part of the 90 Min Podcast Network. The team news, I put out my predicted 11 because I didn't do a preview for this game on Twitter I think it was on Friday. And I preferred actually to see Graham Potter match up Spurs and go with a 3-4-3. Badiashile, Silva and Fofana as the back three. Chilwell, James as wing backs. Enzo and Ruben as a midfield two. And then Felix, Sterling and Havertz as a front three. To be honest, the team he actually put out there was not, in terms of actual personnel, it wasn't radically different to what I suggested. I was a little bit surprised that Badiashile wasn't starting. I know he didn't have the best game last week, but I think for someone who's asserted himself really well as a young defender, I was just a little bit surprised that he didn't feature in this game. And I don't think Koulibaly had an awful game, the player that replaced him, but I think that was maybe a little bit harsh on Badiashile. And then you had Raheem Sterling coming in, but then when you actually looked at the team, you felt, well, personnel-wise, with the exception of Sterling in for Mudryk, that was the 11 that started against Borussia Dortmund, where obviously we did have quite a good performance. Of course, not scoring, but it'd be silly now to say it wasn't a good performance, or it wasn't a performance where we created good opportunities. So I can understand maybe the logic behind that, but and Chelsea started, I think, well, in the sense that we were controlling the game. We were dictating possession, which is what you expect against this Spurs side. They do like to sit in. They do like to soak up pressure. I think against better quality opposition, they've been found out consistently when that has happened. Against Chelsea, that isn't the case because we can't score goals. But then it felt like a few once there was a little bit of physicality, Spurs got a few moments on the break. Nothing serious. It felt like the game and Chelsea's of that inspiration, as we see so often this season. When Chelsea have good moments within games, it lasts very short periods of time, and that was it really for the rest of the game. And then we had the Ziyech moment before half time. I know he was criticised, Graham Potter, for playing Hakim Ziyech in the first place, because this is a guy who was on the verge of joining PSG. I did say when he was on the verge of joining PSG that the weeks before then he was actually doing some good things for Chelsea on the pitch. I thought he was one of our better performers, creating goals, creating good opportunities. But it was such a petulant moment, and at first my reaction was Chelsea got very lucky. I still think Chelsea got very lucky, because you would have seen things before and seen things after where that was a red card. And my question to a Chelsea fan would be, if that's a Spurs player doing it to one of our players, if rather than it was on Emerson Royal, wasn't it? If that's Emerson Royal and Hakim Ziyech, are Chelsea fans calling for a red card? When I saw a different angle, it didn't look as clear to me, but we got away with it. So then you go into half-time and it looks like a bit of an even game. I felt that maybe there's a chance this just ends 0-0 at this point, or Chelsea get lucky somehow and we can maybe bring someone off the bench and change things. But then to concede a goal in that manner, where falling asleep, and that is the biggest detriment to a head coach, is the fact that it's a tight game. Chelsea have maybe got away with one. It's a tense game. It's a derby. But there's enough there to maybe think, Chelsea haven't been awful here. And then to come out literally where seats were still being filled up in the stadium and we're 1-0 down already, which at the current moment is effectively like a knockout punch for Chelsea at this point, because I thought at that point that this probably is game over, and it proved to be honest, as the half wore on. It was a good strike, but you can talk about the positioning of Kepa. You can talk about the lack of a good clearance in that position, and the positioning of certain players on actually both goals. Because I'll go to the second goal as well. The second goal was just, it's pathetic to concede a goal like that to Harry Kane, because it's classic Harry Kane, and it's people on, you talk about people criticising Enzo's positioning, Koulibaly's positioning, Raheem Sterling. It's the classic Harry Kane and Spurs from a corner move, and to get done by it at that point in the game when Graham Potter, I think, was about to bring on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and a few other players, where maybe the last 10 minutes could have been a bit different, but of course it just kills the game at that point. You look at those players, and particularly Joao Felix today, who was trying to do things in the first half, but I think he really deteriorated, and he had a few moments in the first half, particularly when Chelsea were a lot better, to play a killer pass, and he failed to do so, and that really cost Chelsea. But all around the team, I thought Sterling was probably our brightest player in the first half, but that deteriorated. There is such, whenever we move forward, it looks so turgid and so like mission impossible. You can see at times the apprehension for players when they get into that final third of missing a chance, of maybe not wanting to take the responsibility of potentially missing a chance. And that in itself, it is what makes watching this current Chelsea team equally as depressing, because you can talk about the tactics, you can talk about the way players are being shifted about, and the coaching side of things, and of course it's a reflection of the coaching currently, but it's more a sense that I really struggle to think back to a time of watching Chelsea when we were fun to watch. And I'm talking quite a while here, and the adversity thing, I will pin that from the sort of second half of last season as well. There are problems that are going on, and why, despite whatever happens with Graham Potter over the next few weeks, it's my big concern. Let's say hypothetically Graham Potter is sacked and someone else comes in, what happens when we go 1-0 down in a game? What happens when after a brief upturn in results we get a difficult run? How do these players react? How does the next coach deal with that and root out these problems that have been ongoing. That is a deeper, long-held concern for me, of the mentality of dealing with moments in games and in seasons that are going to be difficult. And there's been absolutely no evidence this season at all, growing evidence against that this group of players can deal with moments like that. And that is a fundamental barrier for whatever we want to achieve at Chelsea in the upcoming years, whether that's, getting back into the Champions League, whether that's eventually winning the Premier League itself. If you can't have that as a baseline, we are going to fall at so many hurdles. We just are. So that has to be rectified. And as I say, I'm not convinced that despite whatever upturn you may get in replacing the head coach, those are deeper concerns I've seen over the last half a decade that are still going to be there. Even if Chelsea are higher up in the table, I think we're being dishonest if we say there are things we see in this current Chelsea team to an extreme level that we haven't been concerned about in recent years. It's just kind of right in front of our faces right now. We're mid-table, we're miles off the Champions League, we're losing games consistently, we're not scoring goals. So all of that is heightened. But that is a very honest concern. But then on the flip side of that, you've got a sense where you people who, like myself, who are not going to sit here and scream for someone to be sacked, because that's just not my style. But it'd be just silly of us to look at the current team and to look at the run of results and performances and the lack of improvement and just the lack of something. Even if you are talking about a work in progress and you are dealing with a massive squad, the fact that we don't see the odd good performance, the fact that we don't see the odd good result, or just a sense of it's going in, we score goals, we're maybe a little bit more erratic. You remember Frank Lampard's first season, it was basketball games at times, but at least you were getting some enjoyment watching the team. And even if, in the end Lampard failed, there was something tangible to take away from that team as an identity of young players, or just a sense that team were going to excite you and you believe that they could create opportunities in games. It's the fact that this team is there's just nothingness. I mean, it's a bland, it's such a shallow team. There's no ideas to really take from this current team. There's no sense of an identity. I know all these words sound like very, cliched and kind of they lack meaning at this point because we say them so often in football sort of media and conversations. But, it's the fact that there's nothing of that. And, apart from the first block of games where Graham Potter was Chelsea head coach, where I think you can make a case that was there, more and more you've seen him go to a sense of I'm playing more of a 4-2-3-1. That's going to be my formation, or a 4-2-2-2. He stopped experimenting. My belief is that it's part maybe the scrutiny of the job, or also part when he tried to experiment before the World Cup. It went horrendously wrong against his old employer in Brighton, and he seemed to just maybe crawl back into his shell a little bit. Whatever it is, I think it's really taken away, bit by bit has taken away my sort of confidence that this is going in a positive direction. And you can't keep losing over and over again. And as I say, I think that's what makes it just, I'd be dishonest with, one of the things I pride myself on, as I'm sure like a lot of people who do this, right? I want to be honest with you guys about what I feel when I'm watching Chelsea. And even if I call this the rational perspective, but you may think this is irrational, it's just not fun watching Chelsea at the moment. It's so unenjoyable. It's just soul destroying. It makes your love of football just ebb away slowly, week by week. And that's the way I'm feeling, and I'm sure like that's the way a lot of you feeling. I know some people will have different reactions to that, but none of us can look at this currently and say it's remotely enjoyable, remotely inspiring, remotely something where we can honestly have conversations that makes me think that, I said a few weeks ago and months ago that Graham Potter, can he get to the end of the season showing sort of baseline things? But he's not even doing that. He's not doing enough at the moment in results and performances to get himself to that stage. And I think there always comes a point where, if you're not getting a response from the players, what is the alternative? And it's going to be another difficult week, because if the owners want to stick by their guns and that's their decision, I think it's going to be another week of a lot of difficult questions, awkward questions, and then you go back to Stamford Bridge, and again, there's such little evidence this season of these players responding to difficult moments. Like, I know there's a lot of people walking into today's game going with the old Spurs Chelsea thing of, Chelsea, this is when we get a result. And on the evidence of this season, that just hasn't been the case. I don't know how anyone can feel like that anymore about this team, because there has been such little evidence. And I know some people will be screaming right now, that's because of the head coach. I don't think it's as simple as that, because I was seeing stuff like that early on in this season, and arguably last season too. But it's got to a point now where I just hope there are very serious conversations going on at Chelsea's hierarchy at the moment. I hope it isn't just blind faith. I would like to think there are serious conversations about, what if next weekend we lose again? If you're going to stick with him for next week, how long does this go on? And when is that tipping point? And when does this turn around? What is it? Is it just surviving until the summer when you can ship off a load of players? And that's based on the assumption that is the thing that's going to unlock Graham Potter's coaching at Chelsea. But I think that's probably unrealistic. And also it removes agency and responsibility from the guy in the dugout at the moment in his coaching team of just implanting something with a group of objectively very talented players. It's just bizarre watching Chelsea in recent years and seeing, I know, very good players look limited and look out of ideas. I know these players are better than this. Like, Raheem Sterling is not an awful attacker. I know that Kai Havertz, for all my criticisms, can do good things on a football pitch. Mason Mount looks a complete shell of the player he was. He's gone so far backwards this season. There are many you can look at, and my concern is, the longer this goes on, not only is the mood around us as fans going to get worse and worse and worse and toxic, as we will wrap up this episode, because I need to talk about something else. That's my concern. So maybe conversations are going on. We will see. The final thing to speak about, and to make this episode even more depressing, but I would have liked to have done this on a separate show, but I feel like by tomorrow, we don't know what tomorrow will bring, to be honest. But I had to address this and I have reacted to this on Twitter, and I know a lot of Chelsea YouTubers have as well, and Chelsea fans in general, was the death threats to Graham Potter. And I hate to say I'm not shocked. I wasn't shocked when I saw the quotes on Friday. But I wasn't, because if you've been following the discourse on Chelsea Twitter, on Chelsea social media for several years, how can you be shocked? Because the toxicity, the way hatred and abuse and just despicable behaviour, I wouldn't say has been condoned. Like, there's been a lot of us who've been pointing this out for years and challenging it. This is not a representation on Chelsea fans in general, but I think that there has been a sense in recent years that it's the worst thing when I hear, because you're not going to reach the people who do these things, right? The people who sent those death threats to Graham Potter. There's no point talking to those people. There's no point trying to reach those people. Those people have gone off the deep end, completely inexcusable, and support obviously Chelsea investigating where those emails have come from and what will come of it. But the condoning of it, or just the brushing off and kind of sort of shrug of the shoulders of, well, this is what you have to deal with as Chelsea head coach. Just being a decent human being and calling out what is just an open goal, it's just completely despicable. And it was a shameful, I think, moment for Chelsea as a club. Now, as I say, that doesn't paint the broad brush of Chelsea fans, but you see the back page with Graham Potter's face, and it says, they sent the death threats, for my wife and kids and myself, and it's just a real shame, and it makes you even more sad about what's going on at Chelsea at the moment, because it's just utterly despicable and it's utterly disgusting, and I have no time for it, obviously. But I think that there are maybe people who do have platforms who maybe need to think about, at times, maybe endorsing some of these accounts or engaging with some of these accounts, who for several years it's been quite clear on, some of those ones that have been doing these things for a long time, who I've personally blocked, but continue to crop up and do the most obnoxious things. And, whether you call them reactionaries, whether you call them consumers, I think that the problem is there has to be wide condemnation of this, and it's got nothing to do with football criticism. It's not even close to that. It's just sickening, and my fear is that it's Graham Potter now it will be someone else in the future, because that's the way the discourse around football head coaches has gone. I know a lot of reaction to this, and I saw an article that was written, I think, in a Daily Mail, that was about, when did we stop treating football coaches like human beings? And that's just so true. It's the fact that the discourse around head coaches has got to this level, and has been built up and built up and built up. And unfortunately, social media has very much increased those things over a number of years. So I'm going to keep on opposing it. I don't think you should be engaging with people who act in that way, and promoting them, but it's just shameful. It really is. And it's horrible, and it makes you sick to the stomach, and makes you want to go off social media and sort of disconnect, because you just think at times, is it even worth persisting with and worth saving? But I had to address it, obviously. So not a good time. It hasn't been a good time this season for Chelsea, and we will see what the upcoming days bring. Obviously, no game now until next weekend against Leeds. Every game now feels a referendum. I don't even know if you can call it a referendum on the Chelsea head coach. I think that if you speak to a lot of Chelsea fans, they're either going to be sort of very disappointed, like myself, in the current situation, or wanting the head coach to be replaced. So, as I say, see what the upcoming days bring. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.